All right. Hello and welcome to Pathway to Impact, the podcast where we explore impact in unexpected places. My guest today is Michelle Rigby. Michelle has spent the past more than 30 years in criminal defense, handling over 40 murder cases and building one of the largest criminal law firms in Northamptonshire. Am I saying that properly?
You are.
Northamptonshire, and building a career around a simple but uncomfortable idea. The state has immense power and someone has to challenge it. I feel like we should have a drum roll now, like ba-da-da-da-dum. She is also a business owner, a mentor, an author, a dog advocate, and now lives and works between Australia and the UK. This conversation is going to be a really interesting one because it's going to explore what a lifetime spent operating in the gray areas of life can teach us about truth, judgment, identity, and what impact really means. So hello, Michelle. How are you on this beautiful Sunday morning?
Fine. Thank you very much for having me.
I am excited for this conversation. So, right off the bat, let's start with a really heavy question. I know that when I asked you for your bio, you sent me a very beautiful description about a whole bunch of different thoughts and facts about you that I didn't know. And the first question that kind of stopped for me, which I know is a question that is going to be one that you're going to anticipate, is how do you get asked, how can you represent the guilty? You must hear that question all of the time. When people are asking it, what do you think that they're actually asking?
I think they're actually asking, how can you befriend, understand, put forward, represent somebody that you know is guilty? And that's not really what a defence solicitor does. So our job is to make sure that the state can prove the case against the individual. That's it. So we don't make up stories, we don't take sides, we don't want the guilty to go free any more than any other member of the public. But what we do want to do is to make sure that everybody has a voice, everybody understands the case against them, and that they're only punished for the case that they actually face. And if you're a reasonably intelligent person, it can still be a real challenge when you're charged or arrested for something that you haven't done. But if you're somebody who has intellectual problems, mental issues, educationally, you're not as bright or intelligent as the average person, it's really difficult to defend yourself. And it's those sort of people that I've spent my whole career trying to assist. So it's very easy to represent the guilty. It's far more difficult to represent the people that you really think are innocent.
Why is that?
Because you feel the pressure and the weight of it. There's a whole system designed to try and prosecute. So there's a police force, there's a Crown Prosecution Service in the UK, and I would imagine it's a very similar system here. In the firm where I operate, it's me or one of my colleagues and maybe another member of staff that helps, a barrister, King's Counsel if it's a very serious case, 3 or 4 people compared to a whole team of people. And if you think that the person is innocent and you're trying to get experts on their behalf and you're trying to secure funding on their behalf, you take those cases home. They've spent time in my spare room, on my dining table. I've been thinking about them on holiday, in the car, with friends. Wherever you are, you never escape from those sort of cases.
That sounds really difficult to balance, and I'm going to ask you a question about that after, but I still want to investigate a little bit more about criminal defense and criminal law. What do you think that people most misunderstand about criminal defense?
I think they think we're in league with our clients. Certainly the police in the UK, when I first started, which was late 90s, early 2000s, thought that we made up these stories for our clients on a police interview. And I used to say to them, if I made the stories up, they would be considerably better than the stories that some of my clients come out with. They would actually try and fit the evidence sometimes. That's not our role at all. And it's not to make evidence disappear, and it's not to find a better expert. It's to try and sometimes explain the unexplainable. And it's to try and not tar everybody with the same brush. And it's also to protect people from themselves. I sat in on a case where a client was admitting to burglaries, and he admitted to one, and I said to him, you couldn't possibly have committed that burglary. And the police just looked at me, and I said he could not have committed that burglary because I made a bail application that was unsuccessful. So he was in custody when that burglary was committed. So it definitely was not him. But this is the problem with people who perhaps have mental health issues or below average intellect, and they get into a pattern of responding and trying to please, and they think that they're assisting the police and that they're clearing up statistics and that the police are going to be pleased with them and they'll get a McDonald's or an extra cigarette or whatever it is they've been promised. And they don't realise exactly what it is they are admitting to and the consequences of that.
Do you find, so you've been practicing for a while. Do you find that there has been an increase because mental health is obviously something that there's a lot more awareness of these days? Do you find that that plays a larger role in some of the cases that you're seeing rather than what has happened in the past?
I don't think it plays a larger role. I think we're probably more aware of it than we were
Mm,
25 years ago. I think it's always
okay.
been there. I wouldn't say that we deal with it any better, in my opinion, than we did 25 years ago. We talk a good talk about it now, but I think practically speaking, the resources are still as limited as they ever were, if not worse, because we've got more people trying to access them. And very little, it may be different here, I suspect not. But we have a lot of people that are in the criminal justice system that ought to perhaps be dealt with in a different kind of setting. So often things have got very out of hand by the time we see them. And if
Mm,
only there'd been some intervention or some input earlier, they perhaps wouldn't have ended up in the criminal justice system. You get people who mix with the wrong people because they don't fit in anywhere. You get people that are misunderstood. People are thought of as naughty because they can't keep up in class or they don't understand what's going on in class. And therefore, they find other ways of expressing themselves, which starts as pretty delinquent juvenile behaviour, but soon escalates to violence where they can't express how they feel. So when I was in the youth court, there was a lot of anger from some of the young people. But what used to sadden me is there were often young people, 11, 12 years old, they would attend with no parents
mm,
because they've got no support. But even when you found them other places to stay, I had a client who went home despite the fact that home provided no food and he would have to rummage in other people's dustbins.
mm,
He wasn't clothed properly. He wasn't looked after. His basic needs were not met, but he still wanted to go home because
mm.
that was home. And that's a very difficult thing to deal with, especially in younger people. And I think it's getting better, but I think it's still got a long way to go.
I mean, it sounds to me that where you sit with it, you're sitting within a system that you can see everything, how everything is interacting and how everything has an influence on one thing or another. And how do you maintain like your focus on this is my role within the system rather than I would want to go and fix everything else. Like, how do you maintain I'm only focusing on this?
I do try and fix everything else to a degree. And I think the firm that I built and that I now work for really do put in the extra mile. All of the staff who work there, it's more of a vocation than a job. So we do get the psychiatric reports, we do get psychologists involved, we do try and help people access other resources that I don't think a lot of other defence solicitors would do,
Mm,
because it's very difficult to just say, well, that's it, I've reached the end of the part of the process with you, and now you're on your own. Because you've sorted out that tiny little element, but actually the bigger picture hasn't changed at all and may in some respects have got worse, depending on
mm,
whether or not a conviction has followed the process that we've been a part of. The person's position may have, in fact, whatever you've secured, been worse than it was before you met them.
mm. Interesting. In criminal law, it seems to me that you have two people that can walk away from the same event with two completely different stories about what happened.
Yeah.
So what has that taught you about truth and perception? Like, how do you know who to believe? Can you ever really know who to believe?
I think in some cases it's easier. Your standard shoplifting is perhaps easier to see whether the person did in fact conceal the items in their pockets and leave the store without making any attempt to pay for it. They're easy ones. The ones that are more difficult are things like a phrase, assaults, self-defense. Well, what is the standard for that? In England, it's what a reasonable person would think about the situation. Who's that reasonable person? And what do they bring to the table? What judgments, perceptions, life experiences do they have? If you and I were watching an incident out of the window and were asked to explain what had happened, I am fairly certain that we would give very different accounts of what we saw. Both of them would be true, and both of them would be inaccurate in some respects.
Hmm.
So I think there is lots of shades of grey, and it's very interesting when you read big affray cases, riot cases, and that sort of thing, big assaults that are happening in the street. And you have 5 or 10 different eyewitnesses. And when you look at the accounts, it's as if they were all watching a totally different incident to
Mm.
each other. And it's very
Yeah.
difficult then to make a judgment call over who has got it more right than everybody else.
So how do you navigate that gray area? Because part of the aspect of law is that it's very black and white. Like you're either this or you're that. So how if there are many truths to an event that are all decided based on the perception, what is your role within that to discern what is not gray?
I think it is of a grey area. So I think it's more an art than a science. And whether you're performing to a jury or to a set of magistrates or a judge, you have got to try and put forward your client's account with whatever you can tease out from the witnesses as supporting that. And the bits that don't support your account, you've got to come up with an explanation as to why they might feel that or believe that. There are very few witnesses, I think, that out and out lie. There are some, of course, but I think a lot of other people are just mistaken and they, over time, believe that the account that they've given is true when in fact there are bits of it that clearly are inaccurate. CCTV sometimes helps, although it's amazing how many times that does not catch the entire incident or the start of the incident, but that certainly helps. Forensics and things have helped over the years, but they can also be a hindrance too. Transference, DNA, and all that can be very complicated, and that's where we then rely on the world of experts to try and assist us.
Mm. Within can you it sounds to me that, like, I think maybe there's also a little bit of a misconception around what criminal law really is. Like, can you give me an example of the range of clients that you've dealt with over the years?
I have dealt with a man who was convicted of murdering his 9.5-week-old daughter, who I would say is the most upsetting of the cases that I've dealt with. So that's one very extreme. I have clients that I still keep in touch with. I represent children and grandchildren of some of the clients that I first met when I started my career. I've been to weddings, christenings, and funerals of clients. Your life runs alongside some of your clients. There are clients where I feel if we'd met in different circumstances, we might have been friends, and they come into your working life and out of your working life through a set of circumstances. I dealt with a lady who was in court for causing very serious injury by dangerous driving. And the minute I met her, I thought there was something unusual about her case and had her tested by an expert. And it was discovered that she had a heart condition that nobody knew anything about.
Wow.
And I think but for speaking to that expert, she would have gone to prison. But
Mm.
it was very clear that she had passed out as a result of a situation that she knew nothing about. And in those sort of cases, you make a huge difference to a person. She was married, she had a house, she had children. Had she gone to prison, it wasn't just her life that would have been affected. The rippling effect of that would have been huge. People from all walks of life, all backgrounds, all races, creeds, colours. You can't judge anybody by the paperwork that you see in front of you. You've just got to unravel as you go along. And the more you meet a person, sadly, and because I have a lot of repeat offenders, the more you get to know about them.
Mm. So I have that's a two questions that come out of that. One is, if you have been part of people's lives for a very long time, is that a positive thing or a negative thing?
Positive.
Why?
Because you see the changes in them, and even if they are repeat offenders, the fact that they're still coming back to you for help means that they feel that they have somewhere to go, which I
Mm.
think is important. It means that you've done your job, because whenever things are falling apart, they still come back to seek help from you. And it's been important over the years for me to see the impact, not just, yes, I won that case, and for that person, it changed their lives and they never needed help again, but also to appreciate that life isn't always as simple as that, and that there are people that continually need your help, and to feel that they have that trust in you. I mean, I've had clients who say, I'm really sorry to have seen you again because I've let you down,
Mm.
because you're trying to help me and it hasn't worked. Well, that's not letting me down, them letting themselves down in a way because they haven't been able to achieve what they wanted to achieve. I have no expectations of them other than that we get the best result we can at the time that I'm interacting with them. I can't do any more for them than point them off in the right direction and hope the help that I can give them amounts to something, but it doesn't always.
Do you find that reflecting on how your clients interact with the world, does that is there some kind of impact that that has on the way that you interact with the world or the standards that you set to yourself or how you yeah, how you walk in the world?
Yes, I think it's made me realise how fortunate I've been. I came from a background where money was very tight, but love was endless. And therefore, I came from a very rich background, in my opinion. And I've realised from looking at other people's backgrounds how important that is and how different I might have been if I hadn't come from that background. So it's always made me
Oh,
appreciate, I think, how fortunate I've been. But it has given me a cynical view of the world, I think.
okay.
It's made me cynical of governments and bodies that say they're trying to achieve things, put a lot of money into things, but never ask at grassroots how things could be improved and what practically could be done. So I've spent 25 years in a system where the same things come around almost on a loop. And it's
Mm,
suggested it's a new idea, but it's not. It's just renamed, branded, but it's the same idea that didn't work 15 years ago. So is unlikely to work this time round. So I think it's made me quite cynical. It's also made me think that there are very few outwardly bad people in the world. There are just people who are in circumstances that are very difficult and don't have the wherewithal within them and the access to the resources and the support network, I think, to be able to do something about it. And it's made me realise that communities and a support network are probably more important reflecting back on it than I would have initially said they are.
hmm. So do you so there are two questions from that. One, do you believe in good and evil? Like, do you believe in the concept of evil based on what you just said? It's a very religious type question, I
It
guess.
is a very, and I'm not particularly religious. Do I believe in evil? I think there is something within some people where they just don't have compassion or empathy and are therefore able to do things that are just outright cruel. But they are, in my experience of the huge number of people that I've dealt with, in the vast minority. And they're the ones that all the films and the stories and everything get written about. But that's not your average person who is in the criminal justice system. Far
Mm,
from it.
mm. And from what you said about, continuously having strategies come around and the importance of community and network, have you ever considered shifting what you want to influence?
I have, and I think I have now that I've got more time on my hands. Previously, it was an all consuming job, so I could work anywhere between 60 and 90 hours a week, go to court all day, police station all night, back in court again, sometimes without having actually been home to bed and barely eating. Not too many occasions, but enough. Now, I think I would like to try and do things on a more individual basis. Mentoring or something like that is, I think, something where I'd like to have more of an input in fewer people's lives and
Hmm,
try and help so many people is, yeah, the takeaway that I think quality maybe rather than quantity.
interesting. What is something that you've learned about human behavior that most people would find uncomfortable?
I think it's that patterns repeat themselves. I can look at
Sorry, can you say that again? I think the internet is glitching.
patterns repeat themselves, and that's why they're patterns and they're uncomfortable. So I could look at somebody in the youth court and think if they have children, I can tell you that I will be representing their children.
Really?
And yes, and I think a lot of it is parenting skills. It's that real nurture. If they say that between being born and 5 years old is a huge development curve for a child, and if they don't have a certain skill set in that time, that it has huge repercussions for their future.
Mm,
And I would agree with that from what I've seen. So it's now representing the grandchildren of the original clients that I had. I could probably have foretold that if those people had children who had children, that those grandchildren would be our clients.
does that make you like, how does that make you feel?
It makes me sad that the intervention probably hasn't been as significant that as I would have liked because the resources that we have are limited and my role is limited. So I'm not a social worker, I'm not a carer. I am the criminal defence solicitor. And whilst that is an important role and I wouldn't have chosen to do anything else, it is limiting.
Mm. Does that
And
frustrate you?
sorry,
Does that frustrate you?
yes, because I'm a fixer, which I've now realised more and more. I have evaluated myself. And I think that's come from stepping back from the career. So I didn't really know who I was because I was just Michelle, the defence solicitor, working at a million miles an hour and thinking that I was changing a lot. And for some people, I have changed a lot. But on reflecting back, I've worked at a million miles an hour and changed a lot of little bits, but not actually changed anything dramatically overall. But probably for some people's lives, I have. And that's the takeaway, that I've not changed a system. I've not had a huge impact in that respect, but probably in a few individuals' lives, I have sent them down or helped them go down a different path.
Do you feel a sense of disappointment, a sense of accomplishment, indifference?
I feel a sense of accomplishment for those individual people, because that's what I set out to do, was to fight for the person that couldn't fight for themselves. So to make a difference in one person's life in a positive aspect has to be something that you're proud of. I do wish that I could have changed the system a bit more. I think I did locally. I definitely changed it at a local level where I was working and living. I was probably too busy trying to sort that out and running a business to be able to consider doing anything higher than that.
Mm,
But it's very
interesting.
difficult to change a system that's
Yeah.
very entrenched.
Yeah. Yeah, I understand that. And I think that for people that care, sometimes that's a big challenge because you can see how everything and where everything is potentially could be better, and figuring out how to kind of contain your role and understand what impact you want to have. Sometimes that can be challenging. Like it's a little bit admitting like this is the focus and nothing else. That I find for myself personally, sometimes I am challenged with that.
It's incredibly frustrating and incredibly stressful.
Mm. So how do you so that I'm gonna ask a question that kind of connects to that. You have handled more than 40 murder cases. What kind of responsibility does that do to a person over time?
It weighs very heavily. You never escape from the job. And I'm sure there are other jobs where that applies to things like nursing. If you're a doctor, there must be cases that you can't walk away from where you think, I could have done better, or I could have made more of a difference, or should I have sought this expert out, or could I have done that? There's always those cases. And I think if you don't have those cases, you probably weren't at the top of your career
Mm,
mentally. You weren't giving everything to it. But I have had cases where in the middle of the night, I will get up and go and spread them out over my dining room, lounge, spare room, and revisit them again to try and work a different angle. They're very tough. It's fantastic when you win. I had a murder client and he was acquitted, and so we left court and went to the pub. Why wouldn't you? But I've had another where I wasn't convinced that he was guilty and he got 33 years. That's a bad day, and they follow you.
do you have anything excuse me, do you have any practices or any advice that you have found works for you to be able to separate yourself a little bit from that or to deal with it?
Probably now, things like meditation and yoga, not the Michelle that was practicing at a million miles an hour. I would just go and bury my head in a different case that I
Yeah.
thought needed my input. So I was very much move out of one case and then trying to find something else that needed my attention and I could pour my resources into and hope that I achieved a better outcome for them.
Mm. So we've kind of skirted around it a little bit, but you have gone through recently through a very major life change. Do you want to share a little bit about what that is and what was the decision that made to that brought to where you are right now?
So in January 2025, we emigrated to Australia, which has been definitely one of the best things that we've ever done. It was planned a long time ago that this is what we would do for our retirement. But when my mum and our dog passed in 2022, we decided to come earlier. And yes, it's been very good, I think, for my physical and mental health, because I didn't just deal with very difficult cases. I ran a law firm, which I'd never set out to do, and employed a lot of people and constantly absorbing everybody else's problems and not dealing with my own problems, which is not necessarily their fault. I think I used it as an escape. and a reason for not dealing with my own problems, meant that when I came here, I was just exhausted in every aspect. It's been very good for me to still continue to work, but be able to have some time for myself and, yeah, to find out who Michelle is when she isn't running around at a million miles an hour.
Is that a scary thing for you to, like, find a new identity?
Terrifying. It's been extremely stressful in a very, very different way. I'm not somebody that looks inwards very easily. And I didn't even really know who I was or what I liked or what I thought about a lot of things because I'd never had time to have those conversations with myself.
Mm.
So it's been, yeah, a journey of discovery. Not always positive. There's bits about myself that I've not liked that I've had to try and calm down, but, yeah, I'm getting there.
I mean, I think that one thing that you shared with me is that you knew that you wanted to be a criminal lawyer from a very young age. And that's a very strong identity of like, this is what I want to do. You followed through with it. You've been a lawyer. You ended up owning part of the law firm. How do you navigate these shifting of identities? Like especially letting go of one identity that you held so tightly? Can you talk to me a little bit about that?
That's been really difficult. So in 2022, I sold my share of the business, to spend more time with my parents, and then that was the same year that my mum was diagnosed as terminally ill, and sadly, she passed away, and then we lost our dog. We have no children, so we had 2 dogs, and we lost our dog within 5 weeks of losing my mum. So things for 20 odd years had been the same: family, work, frenetic pace. And in the same year, everything that identified me all changed at the same time.
Mm.
And it was very, very difficult. And I dealt with it by devoting all of my resources to my other dog who was ill and my dad and my sister and just caring for them, looking after them, still working and avoiding dealing with the issues. So I'm a very good as a lawyer of telling people that they need to face up to what they've done, and a bit like a doctor telling you you need to eat well, and then you look at the size of them and you know that they don't exercise. Well, I was exactly the same. I was telling everybody that they needed to look at themselves, and I chose to avoid looking at myself and my situation. So it was only when we arrived here and it was just me and my husband that I thought, I've got to get to know me a bit better and I've got to find out what it is that I'm now doing in this next chapter of my life. Yeah, that it's a beautiful place to live and it's fabulous being near the beach. But when you've got to really reflect inwards and you've been avoiding doing it, it's not easy.
Do you feel that your sense of wanting to achieve justice and be a voice for those who don't necessarily have a voice, do you feel like that still sits within you?
Yes, I'm still working remotely for the firm
Yeah.
that I originally ran and I enjoy doing it. I've not never lost the spark for doing it. I think I became overwhelmed when things were happening in my personal life too. And now I found a really renewed sense of wanting to help people, but also trying to find a balance in helping myself be myself and have time for myself, which I always thought was something that other people did. And now it's something that I need to do for myself.
I mean, I think it's really interesting because, a lot of the people that I spend time with or that I have conversations with, they're passionate in their own world. They have a very clear sense of purpose. Sometimes it's not necessarily what people would conventionally think is impact or doing good in the world or however you want to define it, but they often will get to a point where they're burned out because they forget to look at themselves and forget to figure out a way to be able to take care of put the oxygen mask on first, as they constantly say. Looking back at Michelle, who was running around like a headless chook and fighting for justice and spending all of her time head in the sand with work, what would you tell her now?
Take time for yourself because you'll not get that time back later on. And my mum used to say that to me all the time. I used to say to her, when I'm retired, I'll do that. And she used to say, no, you need to be looking after yourself now instead of looking after everybody else. And I made myself really poorly. I had TB, I had a heart condition. I suffered very seriously with COVID and long COVID. Yeah, the one takeaway, if I could go back and revisit my younger self, would be that they are not all talking rubbish. You are not a machine. And it will break eventually if you don't maintain it.
Yeah. I mean, I wish that I could go back to my younger self and say certain things, but I don't think that she would listen. So
I don't think I would listen either.
that's the problem with their younger selves. I want to talk a little bit more about identities. So you wrote a novel called The Dark Side under a different name. Can you tell us a little bit about what the novel is about and why you decided to write it?
The novel is about a firm of criminal defence solicitors who start dealing in drugs. This is not how I've made my money. I want to make that perfectly clear.
Sure.
And it's a bit of a standing joke in our office. We used to say when clients got caught for things, honest to goodness, why do they not think that phones can be tracked and tapped and that the records are all out there? So when you're sending messages to each other and that it's all recorded somewhere, and just deleting it on your phone does not mean that it's gone forever. And so the idea was in my mind that I could write this book. When my mum died and Harley died, I became a very anxious person, which is not something that I have ever suffered from before.
Mm,
And I always thought that I'd had an appreciation of mental illness. But until you suffer with something like that just came out of the blue, you cannot understand it unless you've suffered from it.
mm,
And I found it incredibly difficult because I was a very driven, confident person, but all of a sudden being anxious about everything.
mm,
So I started writing the book in the night when I couldn't sleep and never expected to do anything with it. And when I was 50 years old, my husband said to me, "What do you want as a present?" And I said, "I would quite like to publish my book because it's got Harley in there. It's got thoughts from my mum in there. So it kind of immortalizes things that were important to me." And my husband said, "What book?" Because I'd told nobody. And when it was published, I gave a copy to my dad and my sister, and that was the first. So they were aware that I'd written a book. So I didn't write it to particularly tell anybody or for anybody to read it. I wrote it as my own escapism. Again, I think by not dealing with the issues in front of me, but it enabled me to get over the anxiety to then
mm.
have the tools myself to be able to tackle some of the problems that I was facing.
How did writing give you those tools?
It enabled me to put down everything about, so it's fiction with the exception of Harley, who, as you've probably now worked out, was incredibly important. So Harley was my dog. He came to work with me. He sat in the passenger seat while I was talking to him about these cases that were problematic. He knew how many days it was until I could retire on the days when I was really stressed. So he was my confidant animal, the person that I could just vent to, be myself with, who just loved sitting next to me with his head on my lap, absorbing everything. So once I'd written about him, I felt better. I was expressing how I felt. Once I'd written Caroline, who's one of the central characters, her mum's thoughts, those are my mum's thoughts, enabled me to express, I think, a bit of how I felt about everything. I cried a lot while I wrote it. And I was able to not just be the confident Michelle that holds everything together. I could just let it all flow out.
Interesting. Did writing the novel, like, aside from the release that you had, I mean, it is about, it is about a dark side, which is called the dark side. Did you ever get close to a moment like Caroline's?
Absolutely not. No. We did have a couple of times where clients would buy us inappropriate gifts. There were a few times where clients tried to cross the line, but you have to be very clear in your guidelines, what you're required to do, what you're allowed to do. There were clients that I was friends with. So there was a girl who was a heroin addict and she had a child, and I gave her stuff for the child. She became sick. So I gave her some clothes of mine and things like that. So in some respects, that doesn't cross any ethical boundaries, but it probably for some people would be, no, that you're becoming too close to them. I'd gone to school with some of these people. So we already had a different relationship, but no, absolutely not crossing the line into doing anything inappropriate. No.
Did writing the novel allow you to say anything that you would not necessarily say being a practicing lawyer?
I think it enabled me to sort of voice how you can be friends with clients, but how easy it would be to fall over the wrong side. When you've been a part of somebody's life for 20 odd years and they've been a part of yours, but they're on the wrong side and you're not, it would be very easy to cross over if you were not careful,
Mm,
especially as I've been to weddings of some of the clients and that sort of thing. So you've got to know where your boundaries are, and that you've got to know that they know that you're not the sort of person that's going to cross over those boundaries. And most of the clients that I spent any social time with would never have expected me to, and never tried to get me to.
mm.
They would know very clearly where that line was.
I mean, I think that when I read the novel, which I enjoyed, I thought that it's one of those things that's kind of a little bit about those gray areas, right? It depends. Some of the story was about grappling with working in a environment that you feel that the work that you're doing is very important, but the reward that you're getting might not necessarily be reflected in the way that you want it to be reflected. To me, it was also about how easy it would be to, the temptation that is always there to do something that is not. And yeah, and the whole concept of you and I can be standing in the same room and having a very different perception on what exactly is and what exactly is not. What are some of the takeaways that you would like people to have from reading the book? Or what is like some of the main messages that you would want from people to to feel when they're reading the book?
I would want them to appreciate that criminal defence solicitors work incredibly hard. I don't know how well paid they are over here, but certainly in the UK, they are the poor relation of most solicitors. So I never went into criminal law to make money. I was encouraged at university to go down a different route and go into business law, commercial law, because you make more money. I couldn't think of anything more dull. It's not for me. I'm certain there are people who've had fantastic careers and very interesting careers doing it, but it definitely wasn't something that I wanted to do. So I hope they'll appreciate that it's a vocation, that there are people that really need help, that your success and what I considered to be my success wasn't necessarily financial gain, but it was gain in so many other aspects, particularly change. For some people, we have made a real difference. And for some people, they have the prospects of a really good life because we unravelled a situation that wasn't what the prosecution thought it was. And the driving case I referred to earlier is a really good example of that. But there was a couple of other murder cases where we've actively gone out and sought witnesses and found out that one of the people who was charged should in fact have been a prosecution witness. So that was resolved for a case. Another guy got manslaughter instead of murder. Huge difference as far as sentence is concerned. So it's a very difficult job, and the answers aren't always what you might expect them to be. So I'd like people to sort of realise what an impact we do have. And it's not just for those individuals, but it's for the community at large, but also just to enjoy the whole escapism of it. And hopefully there aren't too many defence solicitor firms that are operating like that, and that it really just is fiction, and to realise what a marvellous dog Harley was. And I hope
Yeah.
that if they have a dog in their lives, that they are half the dog that he was.
Dogs play a really important role in your life. Can you talk to me a little bit about why that is and what you feel around that? Why dogs? Why not cats or elephants or giraffes?
It's all animals. I'm an animal lover. Harley came into my life unexpectedly. We were not planning to get a dog. My best friend had our godchildren, and we went up to see them one weekend, and the neighbour's dog had had puppies, and there they were, and that's how we ended up with Harley. And I think because he came to work, he was with me during some of my really sick times, he became incredibly important. But I've always had an affinity with animals. And I always said I couldn't understand why I started looking after people instead of animals. But I think it's because I would never be able to euthanize an animal. So that's
Mm,
probably a good reason. I've always found dog cases difficult at work. So we've dealt with dogs that have been allegedly dangerous, bitten somebody or whatever. The person's being prosecuted, but it's the dog that faces the destruction order. And those cases are very, very difficult. Also, dog cruelty cases, they're very difficult too. So they're the cases that I've struggled with. Those and anything involving children are
mm.
particularly difficult.
So you now live on the other side of the world,
Yep.
far away from the life that you spend decades building. What has that distance helped you see more clearly?
I think it's helped me see that I need to take time for myself, that I'm not a machine, that I've had an impact, I've built something, and it works very well without me, which I initially found very difficult to accept, even though that was my goal, because I suppose there's part of all of us that thinks it's us that makes the difference. It's not just the structure around us, it's us as individuals. And it's made me realize that the mechanism will carry on turning long after I have any input whatsoever. But I think the distance has given me a renewed determination, enthusiasm, energy when perhaps I was getting a little bit overwhelmed and cynical to the extreme, just being worn down by a system that you're constantly a part of, but constantly made to feel that sometimes you're an irritant because you're the defense, you're raising objections, you're raising questions all of the time and challenging all of the time.
So you've built I really want to dig a little bit into the concept of identity because I think that it's so clear in your case that you went from being very focused on this is my identity, this is who I am, these are the values, this is how it's represented, to really being in a space where you're kind of examining and trying to figure out a way forward. If people who are listening are going through something similar, where it's a really major shift of identity, what kind of advice or what would you like to share with them that you feel would potentially help? Whether it's part of your journey that you found really interesting, or a key framework, or a key takeaway, or whatever it is.
Take time, don't rush. Because I worked at such a fast pace, lived at such a fast pace, but had been doing the same thing for so long, that was me. And so when I came here and none of that existed and I couldn't find who I was, I panicked and then put myself under pressure to find friends, do this, do that, establish a whole new me, work out who I was, and almost set myself a time target that had got to be achieved immediately, and felt very uncomfortable in myself when I didn't achieve that. Whereas what I should have done is just taken a pause and lived each day just for what that day brought to me, rather than actively trying to make everything happen all at once.
Do you ever worry about how you are going to express your purpose or your values in your next step of your identity? Or
Yes.
how do you wrestle with that?
The moment, I am doing enough with my work because I still supervise and help some of the staff that were originally my staff. So I have a lot of connections with them. I am still working on some pretty big cases and helping manage a lot of other cases. So I'm still having a good impact on the firm and therefore on the clients and the staff. So I feel my purpose has probably renewed a bit with work now that I've settled into my new role. And I'm building a friendship network, of which you're a valuable part over here now. Um, I'm hoping then that that will lead me on to the next chapter once I've had a chance to really establish what it is I want to do next. And I think that's the key. For 30 years, I've been doing what I wanted to do as a career, but to the very best of my ability and devoting everything to it. And now I have the option to do that on a part time basis and find out what else it is that I want to do where I think I could make a difference. And that may be something like mentoring, or it may be something to do with animals. I've yet to figure that out, but I've only been here just over a year, and everybody keeps telling me that I'm very new and I need to calm down and not rush into it as if I'm running out of time.
I mean, that I resonate with that. I feel that, I suffer from a lot of time anxiety. I'm like, okay, there's only one life. Let's go. Let's get this done. What are the things that I need to do? And I definitely feel, a lot of what you said really resonated with me about this shift of identity, transitioning, transmuting from one identity, which was like, PhD, to, as you know, next week I have my final defense and then I'll be done with the whole PhD, and trying to figure out, what do I do with it? How do I express it in the world? How do I make sure that all of that time that I've spent on it is not wasted, that I can somehow translate it into something that has value and that brings light to the world and that continues to build on the work that I strongly believe in. But I find that really difficult, like trying to navigate a new identity and trying to navigate a new, like, you're going to be able to call me doctor. But aside from that, like finding that time, finding the right way to express that can be very challenging. Yeah. Do you have anything else you want to add around that? Because I feel like you have a lot more wisdom around this that you're still kind of developing and thinking about.
I am. I'm just trying to take some time to think about exactly what it is that I want to achieve next rather than rushing into it.
Mm.
And part of my situation is that I still go back to England for a significant period of time each year to carry on working over there. And that's tied in with family commitments still over there. So if I wasn't doing that, I may have already changed where I'm going here. But it fits in with my family's needs and my needs to be with my family over there. And also continuing to do what I loved doing, and I'm lucky to still be able to do that, and I'm not ready to give that up yet. And so anything that I do here will only be part-time, and I don't want to end up in a position where I'm not doing justice to either part because it's part-time, because again, that's something that I will worry about and stress about. So I'll end up doing 2 part-time jobs, but trying to turn them into 2 full-time jobs, and I'm anxious not to do that and get sick again. So part of my identity is realizing that I can't do everything all of the time, and I need to actually just do what I'm doing properly whilst taking time for myself.
What is your definition of impact?
My definition of impact is affecting somebody else or a community or a situation, hopefully for the better. I know that impact can be negative, but I hope that any impact that I've had has been positive, and that's very important to me, whether it's on an individual level or a group level or a community level or even wider than that.
And what do you think your Michelle, who was in England, what do you think her definition of impact was?
Her definition of impact was trying to do as much as she possibly could to change everything all at the same time. So probably what I've just said, but on speed. And that's not necessarily a good thing. I probably have a wider lens now, is how I would describe it. I was very narrow minded, narrow focused, which I think suited the purpose at the time. Now I can have a wider focus, a wider lens, and perhaps make a difference. And I definitely am making a difference even in the firm by being able to take more of an overview than when you're narrow minded running it. Now I get a chance to step back and say, well, can we tweak this? Can we look at this? Because I can just see the bigger picture. But I think that comes with self reflection, analysing myself in detail, which has not always been positive, and just being able to take a step back.
What do you think your mom would tell you right now?
I hope that my mum would be really pleased that I have finally found myself. She would have liked me to have said all of this, I'm certain, 20 odd years ago when she was saying it to me. I think she would be very pleased that I made the break earlier, because she was always concerned that I was planning for a retirement I might not see, or I might not have the health to enjoy in the way that I'd hoped. And I remember her very clearly saying, you've worked so hard, I hope you get to see everything it is that you want to see and do. So I think she would be very pleased with the self-reflection. I think she would still say, slow down, do a bit more paddleboarding and just calm down.
Thank you. I have an unscripted question. By the way, I didn't ask half of the questions that I had. It was more interesting to just follow my nose. Do you have a question that you would like to give or that you would like me to ask to my next guest?
Oh, that's interesting. I have no idea how old your next guest is going to be. I would like you to, if they're older, to ask them what they would have told themselves 20 or 25 years ago. And if they're younger, what would they like to tell themselves as their older version, which they think their older version will need to hear? I think that would be really interesting. I would like to have written down 20 odd years ago what I would like to be able to tell myself now, and see if I read it, what I would think to it.
Huh. That's a good question. Thank you. Thanks so much, Michelle, for joining me for this conversation. I really appreciate it. I
Thank you
will
for
put
having
the
me.
link to the book where you can purchase the book in the show notes, and make sure to follow and listen to the next conversation. Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.